This is the moment everything changed in the Strait of Hormuz. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that what we're seeing right now could completely redefine how power works in one of the most important choke points on Earth. Because just when it looked like Iran was tightening its grip, just when analysts were starting to whisper about a possible blockade becoming reality, something appeared in the sky that flipped the entire equation in seconds. And the moment I saw those low-flying silhouettes cutting across the horizon, I knew this wasn't just another patrol. This was a message. A very clear, very calculated message that control of this region was about to be challenged in a way Iran may not have fully expected. And if you think this is just another military movement, you're missing what's really happening here. Because this isn't about presence, this is about dominance. And dominance in a place like the Strait of Hormuz doesn't just stay there. It echoes across the entire world. I want you to understand something before we go deeper, because a lot of people hear the name Strait of Hormuz and they think it's just another location on the map. But it's not. This narrow stretch of water is one of the most critical arteries of the global economy. Nearly a fifth of the world's oil flows through it, which means what happens here doesn't just affect one country or one region. It affects fuel prices, markets, economies, and daily life across continents. And that's exactly why control over this strait has always been more than just military positioning. It's leverage, it's influence, it's power. And for a long time, Iran has understood that better than most, which is why its strategy has always revolved around one key idea. If you can't match your opponent ship for ship, you control the choke point in a different way. And for a moment, it actually looked like that strategy might work. Because what Iran built wasn't a traditional naval force designed to go head-to-head. It was something different, something more unpredictable. Fast attack boats, swarm tactics, hit-and-run capabilities designed to overwhelm and confuse rather than confront directly. And when you look at it from that perspective, it's not hard to see why some analysts started to take the idea of a blockade seriously. Because in a narrow waterway like this, you don't need overwhelming force. You need disruption. You need chaos. You need just enough pressure to make movement risky. And for a brief moment, that pressure was building. You could feel it. You could see it in the movements, in the positioning, in the growing tension that was slowly turning this strategic corridor into something far more unstable. And then everything changed. Because the response that came wasn't slow, it wasn't hesitant, it was precise, calculated, and designed to send a signal that could not be ignored. And that signal came in the form of AH-64 Apache helicopters, flying low, fast, and with a level of control that immediately shifted the atmosphere from uncertainty to confrontation. And I'm telling you, when these machines enter a situation like this, they don't just observe, they dominate. Because this is exactly the kind of environment they were built for. Fast-moving targets, unpredictable threats, confined spaces where precision matters more than sheer numbers. And suddenly, the advantage that swarm tactics rely on starts to fade. Because when you're being tracked, targeted, and engaged from above, speed alone is no longer enough. And the moment those Apaches engaged, you could feel the shift. Not just physically, but psychologically. Because warfare isn't just about weapons, it's about perception. It's about who believes they have control, and who starts to realize they might be losing it. And in that moment, the confidence that had been building around the idea of a blockade began to crack, because what looked like a controlled escalation suddenly turned into a vulnerability. And that's the thing about strategies built on pressure. They work until something disrupts the pressure itself. And that's exactly what happened here. Because once air power entered the equation in this way, the entire dynamic changed. Now imagine being in that situation. You're relying on speed, coordination, numbers, and suddenly there's something above you that can see everything, track everything, and respond faster than you can react. That's not just a tactical challenge, that's a psychological one. And this is where the narrative starts to shift from confidence to uncertainty. Because once that doubt sets in, once the realization hits that the plan might not hold under this kind of pressure, everything starts to feel different. Movements become more cautious, decisions become more reactive, and that sense of control begins to slip. And I'm not saying everything collapsed instantly, but I am saying that the moment those helicopters took control of the skies, the idea of an easy blockade became a lot harder to believe. And this is where things get even more interesting, because what we're witnessing here isn't just a clash of forces, it's a clash of strategies. On one side, you have asymmetric tactics designed to exploit geography and unpredictability, and on the other, you have precision air power designed to neutralize exactly that kind of approach. And when those two collide, the outcome isn't just decided by numbers, it's decided by adaptability, by who can impose their advantage more effectively. And right now, it looks like the balance is shifting in a way that few expected this quickly. And that's why this moment matters so much. Because it's not just about what's happening, it's about what it means for everything that comes next. Because the moment control starts to shift in a place like this, the ripple effects are immediate. Markets react, analysts reassess, governments pay attention, and suddenly what was a regional tension becomes a global concern. Because if the Strait of Hormuz remains open and secure, stability holds. But if it becomes contested in a way that disrupts flow, even briefly, the impact can spread faster than most people realize. And that's why every movement here is being watched so closely, not just by those directly involved, but by the entire world. And that level of attention adds another layer of pressure to an already tense situation. At the same time, you can see the reaction building across different spaces. People online are already debating what this means. Some are saying this proves the blockade was never a real threat. Others argue this is just the beginning of a larger escalation. And that divide in perception is important, because it reflects the uncertainty that surrounds moments like this. No one fully knows how far this will go, how each side will respond, or what the next move might be. And that uncertainty is exactly what keeps situations like this on edge, because when outcomes are unclear, every decision carries more weight. And that brings us to the bigger picture, because as much as this moment is about helicopters and boats and tactics, it's also about something deeper. It's about control, about who shapes the narrative of power in this region. Because for years, the idea of a potential blockade has been part of the conversation, a kind of strategic leverage that could be used if tensions escalated. But what we're seeing now suggests that executing that idea in reality is far more complex than it appears on paper. Because once countermeasures are deployed effectively, the risks increase, the margins shrink, and the cost of pushing further becomes harder to justify. So when I step back and look at everything that's unfolding, I don't just see a military encounter. I see a turning point, a moment where assumptions are being tested, where strategies are being challenged, and where the outcome will likely influence how similar situations are approached in the future. Because if one side demonstrates that it can maintain control under pressure, that sends a message, not just here, but everywhere. And messages like that don't stay contained. They shape decisions, they influence policies, they redefine expectations. But here's the part that a lot of people overlook. Because while we focus on dominance and strategy and outcomes, there's always another layer, the human layer. The reality that behind every movement, every decision, every escalation, there are consequences that go beyond maps and headlines. And that's why moments like this carry so much weight, because they remind us how quickly things can shift, how fragile stability can be when pressure builds, and how important it is to understand not just what is happening, but why it matters. Right now, the Strait of Hormuz remains one of the most watched places on the planet, not because of what has already happened, but because of what could happen next. Because even though the situation may look like it has stabilized in this moment, the underlying tension hasn't disappeared. It's still there, still shaping decisions, still influencing movements. And that means this story is far from over. In fact, it may just be entering a new phase. One where every move is even more calculated, every signal even more deliberate, and every outcome even more significant. So the real question isn't just what happened, it's what happens next. Because if this moment has shown us anything, it's that control is never absolute. It's constantly being tested, constantly being challenged, And in a place as critical as this, those challenges don't just affect the region, they affect the world. And that's why this isn't something you can just ignore or dismiss as another headline. Because the next development, the next shift, the next decision could take this in a completely different direction. And that's why I keep coming back to this one thought. We are watching something unfold in real time that could define how power is projected and contested in one of the most important regions on Earth. And whether this leads to stability or further escalation depends on choices that haven't been made yet. And that uncertainty is what makes this moment so important, because it reminds us that history isn't just something we look back on. Sometimes, it's something we're watching as it happens. So now we wait, we watch, and we try to make sense of it all. Because right now, the situation may look controlled, but the story is still developing. And if there's one thing I'm sure of, it's that this isn't the end, it's a turning point, and what comes next could change everything. And if you've stayed with me this far, I want to know what you think. Is this the moment the balance truly shifted, or just the beginning of something even bigger? Because one thing is certain, this story is far from over, and the next move is going to matter more than anything we've seen so far.